In 1973, a man walked into a room at CIA headquarters and ordered the destruction of a program's entire file archive. Teams of CIA employees spent days feeding documents into shredding machines. The public learned for the first time that the United States government had spent 20 years secretly experimenting on its own citizens. This is the story of Project MKultra, and the fact that you are hearing it at all is only because someone, somewhere, misfiled a box.
The Cold War and the Fear of the Mind. It is 1950. The Cold War is 2 years old. The United States and the Soviet Union are in a race not just of weapons and territory, but of ideology. Each side trying to prove that its system of government, its way of life, is superior. And in the United States intelligence community, a specific fear has taken hold. American prisoners of war returning from Korea are behaving strangely. Some appear to be psychologically altered. Some have made public statements supporting communism that seem entirely inconsistent with who they were before capture. The CIA's best analysts are convinced that the Soviet Union has developed a technique, call it brainwashing, call it mind control, for rewriting a person's beliefs and behavior without their awareness. If that technology exists, the United States needs to develop it, or defend against it. Either way, the answer is the same: experiments on human beings. In April 1953, CIA Director Allen Dulles authorized a program to research behavioral modification. The program was given the cryptonym MKultra. The man chosen to run it was Sidney Gottlieb. He was 33 years old. And for the next 20 years, he oversaw a program of experiments on human beings that violated every ethical standard in existence, most of which, it must be said, did not yet legally exist in a form that could stop him. MKultra was not a small program. At its peak, it included 149 separate sub-projects operating across 80 institutions, 44 universities, 15 research laboratories, 12 hospitals and clinics, and 3 prisons. All of them received CIA funding. Most of them did not know the funding came from the CIA. The subjects included prisoners who were told they were participating in medical studies, mental patients who were told they were receiving treatment, civilians in bars who were served drinks laced with LSD by undercover CIA operatives who watched from across the room to see what would happen, soldiers who were told they were testing gear, patients in psychiatric hospitals who were simply never told anything at all.
Let's be specific about what MKultra actually was. The central drug of interest was LSD, lysergic acid diethylamide. In the early 1950s, LSD was not yet known to the general public. It had been synthesized in Switzerland in 1938 and was a substance of genuine scientific interest. The CIA became convinced it could be used for interrogation, that a person under its influence could be made to reveal information, or could be made compliant, or could be psychologically broken and rebuilt. Sidney Gottlieb was so convinced of LSD's potential that in the early 1950s he arranged for the CIA to purchase the entire world's supply from the Swiss manufacturer Sandoz Laboratories. The purchase price was $240,000, the equivalent of over $4 million today. He then distributed it to prisons, to hospitals, to university research programs, to safe houses in New York and San Francisco, where CIA operatives would bring civilians under false pretenses, dose their drinks, and observe the effects for hours. The safe house program was called Operation Midnight Climax. CIA officers hired prostitutes to lure men to apartments in San Francisco. The drinks were spiked. Two-way mirrors had been installed. CIA officers watched and took notes. These were not volunteers. These were not people who had agreed to anything. Elsewhere, the program was broader. Subjects were given not just LSD, but mescaline, heroin, barbiturates, and amphetamines, sometimes in combinations, sometimes in doses far beyond anything that could be considered medically defensible. The goal was to find the point at which human psychological resistance broke. Some subjects were subjected to sleep deprivation for days. Some were subjected to sensory isolation in tanks. Some were subjected to hypnosis combined with drug administration. Some were subjected to electroshock therapy far beyond therapeutic levels. Many of the most extreme experiments were conducted in hospitals and psychiatric facilities on people who were already vulnerable, already ill, already without the power to refuse. And the institutions that conducted these experiments on the CIA's behalf did so under contract that concealed the CIA's involvement. The funding was passed through CIA front organizations, shell foundations set up specifically to launder the money before it reached the researchers. The researchers, in some cases, knew exactly what they were doing and why. Prior consent was obviously not obtained from any of the subjects. Frank Olson and Ewen Cameron. Two stories sit at the center of MKultra. Each one illustrates a different dimension of what the program was. The first is Frank Olson. Frank Olson was a U.S. Army scientist who worked at Fort Detrick, Maryland, the Army's biological warfare research facility. He was 43 years old. He was married with 3 children. He was, by the accounts of people who knew him, a thoughtful and principled man who had become increasingly uncomfortable with the nature of his work. In November 1953, Olson attended a work retreat at a lodge at Deep Creek Lake, Maryland. It was a meeting of CIA and Army researchers called by Sidney Gottlieb. At some point during the retreat, Gottlieb added LSD to a bottle of Cointreau. 8 of the 10 men present drank from it. They did not know what was in the drink. They did not know they had taken anything until approximately 20 minutes after ingestion. Frank Olson had a severe psychological reaction. In the days that followed, he became increasingly distressed. Frank Olson went through the window of his 10th floor room. He died on the pavement below. His wife was told he had died of a classified illness. His children were told their father had had a breakdown. In 1975, when the Church Committee investigation began revealing MKultra's existence, the Olson family learned for the first time what actually happened. They received a $750,000 settlement from the U.S. government. President Gerald Ford and CIA Director William Colby formally apologized. The second story is Ewen Cameron. Ewen Cameron was a Scottish psychiatrist who had risen to become one of the most respected figures in his field. He was president of the American Psychiatric Association, the Canadian Psychiatric Association, and the World Psychiatric Association at various points in his career. Cameron was pursuing a theory he called psychic driving. The premise was simple and terrifying. Erase a person's existing personality and memories entirely, then rebuild them from scratch. To erase the personality, Cameron used a combination of prolonged drug-induced sleep, keeping patients unconscious for weeks or months at a time, electroshock therapy at voltages 10 to 30 times higher than standard therapeutic levels, and sensory deprivation. His patients were people who had come to the Allen Memorial Institute in Montreal seeking treatment for relatively minor mental health conditions, anxiety, depression. They left with no memory of their lives before the experiments. Some forgot their own names, some forgot their families, some never recovered. The Canadian government, it emerged later, had known about Cameron's work and had contributed an additional $500,000 in funding. Cameron died in 1967, before MKultra became public. He was never investigated, he was never charged with any crime. His victims, or rather the people who had been his patients, who had not known they were part of a CIA program, spent years fighting for compensation from governments on 2 continents. Some won. Many did not. The destruction and what it means. Return to 1973. Richard Helms is leaving the CIA under political pressure. He knows that the Watergate investigation is creating an environment in which government secrets are beginning to come apart. He knows that the Church Committee investigations are coming. He orders the destruction of MKultra's files. Sidney Gottlieb, who retired from the CIA in 1972, the same year Helms ordered the program's formal end, carries out the destruction alongside Helms. Together they feed 20 years of records into shredding machines. What survives is an accident, a clerical error. Files sent to the wrong storage facility retrieved by an archivist 4 years later doing routine FOIA compliance work. Those 20,000 surviving pages tell us a great deal. They also make clear how much was destroyed. In the 1977 Senate hearing, CIA Director Stansfield Turner was asked directly, how many experiments are not accounted for in the surviving documents? How many subjects were involved in programs for which no records now exist? The answer was, we do not know. That is the answer that matters. We know about 159 projects, we know about 80 institutions. We know about Frank Olson and Ewan Cameron because their cases became public in specific ways. But the program ran for 20 years across dozens of institutions, and most of what happened during those 20 years no longer exists on paper. The people who were subjected to it, if they are still alive, are in their 70s and 80s. Many never knew they were part of a government program. They experienced psychological symptoms they could not explain. Some were institutionalized. Some were medicated for conditions they did not have. Some simply lived their lives with a gap they could not account for. What we still don't know. Here is what the surviving documents confirm. The United States government, through its Central Intelligence Agency, ran a program for approximately 20 years, from the early 1950s through 1973, that conducted non-consensual human experimentation on thousands of people. The experiments involved psychoactive drugs, electroshock therapy, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, and psychological manipulation. The subjects included prisoners, mental patients, civilians, soldiers, and, in Ewan Cameron's program, patients who sought psychiatric help for minor conditions and were instead subjected to personality erasure experiments.
Here is what the destroyed documents would have told us and never will. How many people were subjected to experiments for which no records survived? What happened to them? Whether any other deaths resulted from programs that are now entirely gone from the record? What the most extreme sub-projects contained? Whether any element of the program continued under another name after 1973?
Project MKultra remains the largest confirmed program of non-consensual human experimentation ever conducted by a Western democratic government. The official file, most of it, is ash. And what remains tells us only enough to know how much we will never know.
If you want more mysterious cases that defy explanation, click the video on the screen. New investigation every week. And if you want to be the first to know when we uncover more about this discovery, subscribe and hit the notification bell.